So it's going to be wild. I think it's already wild. And if I look around the room here, you're all energized by the band. And that's how I feel. You know, we should actually start all meetings, all mornings with a band like that. I will contest looking around the room here, and I'm looking at wrinkles in the face, on the skin, gray hair, and so on, that none of you has been a leader in a similar moment. Now, there's always an 85-year-old somewhere that gets up. I was already running my kindergarten or school board or something like that. But the last time it was this wild, in my mind, is when I was 6 years old and I was roller skating on the highways of the Netherlands because my parents were not allowed to drive. Nobody was allowed to drive on Sundays. It was actually great as a kid. It was wild. However, it wasn't that great for the parents. House prices fluctuated, inflation was crazy, and all that kind of stuff. And we were in an oil crisis. And this moment is wild, and it's not well enough understood, in my view, because of this geopolitical moment, which is caused by imbalance in military strength and imbalance in resources. The stuff that ships on these things. We believe this moment is so big that we are not just in a moment, not even in a cycle. We are at the cusp of a new era. And the new era is a multi-decadal period in which we will reconfigure where we're heading. And the question is, of course, what are we reconfiguring it to? I will do only one bit of history. We believe there were 3 eras since the Second World War. The post-war boom. We were creating all kinds of stuff, new institutions. We were building everybody a house, everybody a car. In the West, the poverty started to shrink. We had lots of energy, we had lots of money, and we were just building. An economic model was one of growth. Then we had the era of contention, which is the 70s and 80s period. It was not just 10 years, it was 20 years until we got out of it. That was high inflation, that was shortage of oil, shortage of food in the world, and extreme geopolitics. And then the beautiful era of global cooperation, the era of markets. That's where you learned in, that's where you led in, and that's your reference frame from history. We were collaborating, WTO. We were globalizing. We were connecting digitally. We had demographic dividend, tailwinds from increasing population and ever richer middle class. We had enough energy, fossil, but we started to get concerned about climate, and we had cheap money. So which of these 5 is still going to be there? We're talking deglobalization, or some fragmentation, or something complex. We are all kinds of events in right now. We're going AI, which was just discussed. I think it's going to be beautiful, but there are also concerns about whether we're going to do it right. We no longer have a demographic dividend. The fertility rates are so low that we will have strange population pyramids. Not like this, not like that, but like that. And we need to think about that. And then we have an energy debate, which for the last 30 years, or maybe 20, was just one thing. Let's replace the old stuff with the new stuff. We today are in a race for electrons. The one who has the electrons is the one that has the compute, is the one that has the AI, is the one that wins business and war. That's a slightly different frame. And we also would like to have affordability. And so it's a bit more complex energy than just one for one. We'll come to that. And I don't think we have cheap money. Just look at the 30-year rate in Japan, which is, I think, pricing that Japan is going to shrink from a population basis, or look at the 10-year rate in the US. So by now, you don't feel good. It's wild but bad. And I'm going to try to change that. So imagine, and I want to imagine your history. Go back to your great-great-grandparents, your grandparents, your parents, you in the life as a youth with your parents. How was that life? One of my great-grandparents had to live through the Great Depression. One of the things he did for 4 years was basically shoveling the sand from left to right and back to be employed and employ others. Another grandfather was on a train to the east in the war, and it was lucky that there was a raid on the train and the door opened and he could, with his table silver, satisfy his life for 2 years until the war was over. And that's why I'm here. The 70s was kind of funny for me, roller skating, but in the 70s I was also at a farm getting some vegetables. We were cleaning them up in the house, put them in plastic, and I would go on my little bike to a communal freezer. Because at that time, for middle class, a freezer in the Netherlands was still quite expensive. Of course, middle class in China, freezers got cheaper, so now even at the middle class in that level, you have it. And the Rhine was not clean because we couldn't pay for making it clean. Now we can make it clean. And I can go on and on and on with these stories of the past. And in that, when we think about today and say the past was better, we live to something which my daughter said when she read the book that we wrote about what I'm going to talk about. She said, "Dad, that is on TikTok called nostalgia bias," which is you remember all the good stuff and even the very bad, Great Depression, World Wars, great oil price, you forget. If anyone wants to stand up here and say, this today is just so much worse than my great-grandparents and so on, I would like to have dinner with you. We'll have that discussion. But of course, that's the past. Let's also imagine a future. So just think about a country where trust in government is high, the energy is 90% clean, people trust each other, the trains run on time, the clocks are on time, and when your young daughter, 11 years old, somehow overstays her permission in a party and comes home late, you're not worried about whether she will come home safe. But you will worry which citizen of my country will help her come home safe. That country is Switzerland. I'm quarter Swiss, half German, quarter Dutch. Some people can say Swiss is boring because it works. Okay, that's your choice. And maybe it is a little boring, but it works. And our question for the future is the following. Can the entire world in 2100 live in Switzerland? Not in the place, but in the wealth. And of course, it can be different. You can have a Buddhist way of doing it, a Christian or whatever, and a it's not that. But could we raise that wealth as a question and not just take our current predicament? So that country is indeed Switzerland, $82,000. Remember that. So let's do a bit more history. We grew almost not between 1625 and 1725. There were some countries, Britain, for a while, my country, the Netherlands, Spain had their times. Mostly it was capture, by the way, not really only growth. Then, 1725, 1825 got a little better, 1.5. Industrial Revolution times 1825, 2 times richer. And then the last 100 years, the time of our great-grandparents to where we are now, 6 times. Now, of course, when I do speeches and say, Sven, this is GDP per capita, this is the economy, and I agree. I don't care about GDP per capita. I love Europe, I love food, I love culture, I love the rest of the world too, and I love their cultures and their food and their behaviors and so on. But there is a little thing, and we like dots when we do correlations and so on. There's a lot of dots on a slide. Hans Rosling would have done this with even waving sticks and all that kind of stuff. But life expectancy goes with GDP, years of schooling goes with GDP, literacy goes with GDP, democracy goes with GDP, access to safe water goes with GDP, inter-access goes with GDP, electricity goes with GDP, happiness goes with GDP, poverty goes down with GDP, infant mortality goes down with GDP, maternal mortality goes down with GDP, undernourishment goes down with GDP, and pollution goes down with GDP, because you need the money to clean the stuff up. Let me make this point, but this is always misunderstood, which is we should not grow because of the environment. When I was 6 years old, you could not swim in the Rhine because there was cadmium salt chemicals that were dumped from Basel to Rotterdam into the river. And then we got rich. And now the salmon is back. You maybe still can't swim because it's dangerous. But you think that the Indian people, the Indonesian people throw the plastic in the river because they want it? They can't pay for it. Actually, money growth is good because it can pay for the problems. We'll come back to that. The only one where the correlation is quite low is inequality, because that's a choice. You have political systems in which inequality is lower and higher at somewhat similar levels of GDP. There's a bit of correlation, but not that much. So, how did the machine of progress work for our great-grandparents to where we are now? The machine had 8 engines: workers, skill, investment, invention, energy, cities, trade, and markets. So let's do some numbers. We got 4 times the workers' growth in population and 9 times the participation. So we got 9 times the workers. Those workers became more cognitive, 30 to 60. We gave them tools. When the economists talk capital, that's just a machine, a car, a hammer, and so on. So 9 times more tools. A shitload of invention, 10 times more energy. Energy makes the world go round. We don't live so well in warm houses that are bigger because we're just smarter. We use more energy because every square meter has a bit of energy. We live in cities. Cities are good. Communities like this are actually raising the bar of collaboration and innovation. I'm not saying rural is bad. I actually like rural too, but cities are good. Trade went up 3 times, and the market controlled more of what was happening. So, what part of this engine could work for the future to bring us all to Switzerland? Let me just make one point, and I will keep hammering this. Energy makes the world go round. Hans Rosling likes bubbles. You do lots of bubbles, and then you do some correlations. There's one where you can put large, small countries on a straight line, and it becomes a straight line, and that's energy versus GDP. There is no example of low GDP and high energy. There's no example of low energy and high GDP. Energy makes the world go round. We need more of it, lots of it, and we'll come back to that. And we're in the wrong frame on energy. Now, let's make that economy go to Switzerland. There are 2 questions in the design of going to Switzerland. One is, will we solve the fertility crisis and basically go back to normal fertility, replacement rate fertility of 2.1? If that's happening, we would, in 2100, have 11.7 billion people. If we don't fix it, we go down to 7.9. Now, some of you might say, that's good, less pressure. I could have a long debate on that. I'm not going to do that. But we make the puzzle harder. We said, can we do it with 11.7? Yeah, so we're not making it easier. We're not doing the debate. Should it be 11.7 now? Just that. Then you see at the bottom countries of the poorest, like Burundi, going from where they are now, almost nothing, to Switzerland. And you see that the others are still in this model also getting richer. They keep growing at 1.5% GDP. So that's good, by the way, because if you look at the US or Germany or any other country, the bottom of Germany and the bottom of US, the bottom quartile or bottom third or even the bottom half, should they not make progress? Yes, they should. They are actually not that well off. They have the affordability crisis that we talk about and all that kind of stuff. So progress at the bottom in the richer world is still important, so that's why you see that grow. If you add up the 1.5 population plus the 6 times, remember, same progress in GDP wealth per person as the last 100 years, but we're going to do it in 75, is 8.5 times the economy. Now, if you go to the World Bank and many other places, or the IPCC scenarios, what do you think is the economy size in 2100 they take? 3 times. It's a very different movie if you try to get everybody to Switzerland, or you say, no, why don't Africa stay behind structurally? Why does India not stay behind structurally or not? So we're going to keep going, everybody in Switzerland. 5 conditions of plenty that we believe are satisfied and can be done, and we've done the book and we've done all the research in MGI style. We then don't need 1-for-1 energy. We need 2 to 3 times energy of today. Energy makes the world go round. You can't make Africa rich without giving them energy. Lots of energy. That will have to be a lot more electrified, so electricity 7 to 12, and carbon-free will have to go 20 to 30 times. We'll come back to that. We need a lot of steel, copper, aluminium, rare earths, nickel, cobalt, lithium, and so on and so on and so on. It's in the crust of the earth. We need to dig it up, and we, of course, need to dig it up cleanly, but also that can be done. Then food. We need 1.8 times the food. One of the things that we talk a lot about climate. We don't talk about 400 million kids undernourished which brings their IQ down because their brains don't develop properly. We still need a lot more good quality food, 1.8 times. But that's actually less growth in food than we had for the last time. We just need a bit of yield decrease, and we are actually already giving land back to nature. Then, of course, the big question is, can you do this while maintaining the environment and take climate as the big one? In COP and other places, people talk about we're heading to 2.2, 2.6, that's too much. Then there is a discussion, can you go net zero, which is very difficult, but people are talking that what we will be doing or might be doing is a sustainable transformation of 1.8, 2.1, but it's then coming down. So we're taking a bend versus the trajectory, but it's, people can say that overshoots. Now the question is, if I do that instead of with 3 times economy, I do 8.5. How much worse does that get? And surprisingly, it's only 0.1 degree. And I'd like you to go to Africa and India and say, you're not having it for 0.1. When I go there, they say, could you tell the intellectuals in the north that we would like our food and our house and our education and our jobs and so on. And for 0.1, we can say, can we bring the entire baseline down, which will be easier if we have an 8 times economy because we can pay for it. And the last bit is, of course, we need to get growth in productivity. And if somebody just heard the AI discussion or anything else, it's not going to work, of course, if the AI doesn't work, we won't get here. If the robots don't work, we won't get there. But it's not that big. Einstein said there's such a thing as compounded interest, and that's the strongest force. That's what drove the last 100 years. Compounded interest in labor productivity, compounded interest in primary energy efficiency. Commodities are more cyclical, and primary cereal yields are growing at a rate that are just much better than what we need for the future. So that's there. So then let's think about the rich to the poor. What race do they need to run? And we take the race from the 60s and the 70s that we did so far, and how much does that need to change? The rich can sort of do a 60s. They can even slow down and they will be fine and invest for growth. The second quartile just needs to be between the 60s and 70s in terms of growing their capita income. The third quartile just needs to keep the progress that they had. And the bottom, where the poorest live, don't need to do China. They need to do 43% of what China did. And we need to help them and we need to do something, but it's not impossible because understand that the poorest are doing not new growth, they do catch-up growth. First house, first car, first television, and that's already, for some poor, quite a step. It could be first water pump to get better harvest, yeah? Foot pump, not electrical pump. That's for many people. 400 million farmers still have that. Could I have a foot pump that I have? And we're not even getting there. Catch-up growth is what this drives. And in my closing point, I want to make the point, which is the following. We have not made a forecast in doing this. This is not a McKinsey forecast that says 8.5 will happen. We have made an illustration that this is possible, and it's our choice whether we're going to do it. The opportunity is real, is the first thing that you need to believe. We can do it. The second thing is you have to understand that growth is good. It gives you the finances to solve your problems. It doesn't make your problems more bigger than you can't finance. It's a complicated sentence. There's enough stuff for everyone. We don't need to keep Africa and India or whatever other region down because it's so dangerous for us. They can all come into the fore. And then we need to not say that our life is about regulation. It's about building. Your first question is, when is the groundbreaking? Around here, there's a lot of building going on. I like that. When I go to a place, they're building here. When I go to a city, I look, where are the cranes? If the cranes are there, the country is good. If not, it's not. And with that, I would say, I hope the possibility of plenty, a century of plenty, is what you see as a new story of possibility. Thank you.